You're listening to Grimworld, and this is the mysterious story of Mitrice Richardson. Mitrice Richardson, a 24-year-old Los Angeles native who was interested in how the human mind works. She was the first person in her family to not only go to college, but to also graduate from UC Fullerton that year. While going to school, she lived with her grandma, Mildred Harris, in a part of LA called Watts. This area of LA is known for the riots that happened within the city limits in 1992. To make money during her college years, she worked as a go-go dancer in an LGBTQ bar in the coastal city of Long Beach. She had planned to go to graduate school, so after graduation, she decided to keep her job dancing at the bar to pay her tuition while also picking up administrative assistant work. She's hardworking and didn't seem like someone that would get into trouble like this. So, the events of September 16, 2009 were so out of character for her. On that night, she was driving down PCH in Malibu, California. She decides to pull over and get a bite to eat at a place called Geoffreys, an expensive restaurant that overlooks the Pacific Ocean. She drove her '98 Honda Civic in the parking lot as if she was going to valet it, but instead, she got out of her car and got into the valet's car. Kenneth, the valet that night, indicated that she was acting weird, saying things like, "It's Subliminal," and she is here to avenge Michael Jackson, before handing the car keys over to him. Mitrice then goes into the restaurant and asks the hostess if Vanessa was there yet. Vanessa is the name of her ex-girlfriend. The hostess said that no one was there by that name, and Mitrice told her to be on the lookout for a woman with tattooed arms. She was then seated alone and proceeded to order an Ocean Breeze cocktail and a Kobe steak. At a neighboring table in the dining room, there was a table of 7 people hanging out, talking and laughing. After being there for a while, Mitrice decided to go to their table. She got up from her table and sat herself down at the table of 7 and started making conversation with them about astrological signs and other strange things. Just then, one of the staff noticed that she had changed tables, so they went over to see if everything was okay. One of the guests at the table said, "Things are bizarre but manageable." The group and Mitrice continued talking. Over time, Mitrice says that she is going to Hawaii and that she will contact them when she arrives. Yeah, it sounds like that she is acting sane. Eventually, the night ends. The group of 7 leaves and Mitrice leaves with them, but unlike the others at the table, she did not pay the bill. When she was confronted about the bill, she claimed that she thought the bill was being paid by the others at the table. The manager said, "No, you need to pay." In reply, she said, "I'm busted. What are we going to do?" She then reportedly offered sex as a payment, takes out a joint, lights it up, and turned out her pockets, showing that she has no money on her, and she is reported to have said she was from Mars. Those at the restaurant were worried about her and thought the authorities should be called. So the manager called the Lost Hills Sheriff's Station, and on the call the manager reported, "We have a woman here refusing to pay her bill. She sounds really crazy. She might be on drugs or something."
Lost Hills Sheriff's Station, Deputy Shillette, how can I help you?
Hi, I'm calling from Geoffreys restaurant in Malibu.
Yeah.
We have a guest here who is refusing to pay her bill, and we think she sounds really crazy. She may be on drugs or something. We are wondering if someone could come by and pick her up. She's a young black girl. She's probably in her 20s.
Mitrice asked to call her grandma, Mildred, who is in her 90s. Mildred was called by Geoffreys in Malibu saying Mitrice was there and she can't pay her $89 bill. Mildred is stunned by this information. Mitrice is normally so responsible. Mildred then offers to pay with a credit card over the phone in the hopes that she could take care of it. But according to an episode of Disappeared, Lost in the Dark, about this case, the owner of the establishment would not pay the bill because she was not there to sign the receipt. In 2009, you needed to be there in person to physically sign a receipt. Mildred then gets off the phone with the restaurant and immediately calls Mitrice's mom, Lettice Sutton, to see what they could do to help Mitrice. Lettice tells her mom that Mitrice had been acting off lately and seemed depressed. Tessa, Mitrice's long-term girlfriend, had also noticed that her behavior had changed lately also. and her text messages were getting strange and rambling too. Sheriff deputies Armando Lerrero and John McKay are assigned to respond to a possible 390, that is the police code that refers to a drunk person, out at Geoffreys in Malibu. After seeing the details of the report, Deputy Frank Browler decided to go with them to Geoffreys, where they started to talk to Mitrice and others there. Kenneth, the valet, spoke with deputies that night, but when provided with the written report, he noticed that it stated him wrong, so he corrects it by crossing out the phrase, "I did not talk to deputies or any law enforcement personnel that night," and handwrites, "I spoke to 2 of the LASD deputies on the scene. I asked them what happened and or what's wrong with her." One of the sheriff's deputies replied, "She is a ding." A ding is official shorthand to refer to someone who may require a 5150 hold. I told the other deputy that it seemed she was off medication or taking too much medication. At the scene, Deputy Browler did a field sobriety on Mitrice, which passed. When asked why she was here at Geoffreys, she says she was drawn by the light. She was proved not drunk, but the deputies still thought something was off. They asked Mitrice if she was taking medication or had she ever been placed on a 5150 hold. In the state of California, a 5150 is a psychiatric evaluation and 72-hour hold. Also, in California, a person who is arrested and deemed to be a danger to themselves or others can be placed on an involuntary 5150 hold. To both questions, Mitrice answered no. The patrons and staff at Geoffreys who interacted with Mitrice that night all reported that she was acting as if something was wrong with her from when she arrived at the restaurant. Mitrice's family also noted that she was acting strangely around the time of her disappearance. Looking back, the family believed that Mitrice may have had undiagnosed bipolar and is suffering a manic episode, which included hallucinations, delusional thinking, and hypersexuality, all of which she displayed that night. Deputies Browler and McKay searched her Civic, finding it very cluttered. They don't report at the time finding a cell phone, wallet, or any money in the car. They did, though, report finding her ID, clothes, makeup, and some marijuana scraps in the car. Also, they find half-empty bottles of alcohol in the car. Deputy Lerrero made the call to impound her car and arrest her. According to the arrest officer, they left Geoffreys around 8:45 p.m., arriving at the Lost Hills station around 9:50 p.m. That seems a long time en route. When mapped out on my GPS, the travel time on a Wednesday night at that time, it said it should only take 21 minutes, not over 70 minutes. They must have driven through the back roads, maybe even driving through Dark Canyon.
I am calling. I'm a little frazzled right now. I understand my daughter is being brought into the station. Mitrice Richardson. Have they made it to the station yet? And she's been booked in Malibu. And I didn't even think to get the name. The manager's name is...
The only place we have somebody that's in custody that they just announced on the radio that they're coming up is from Geoffreys in Pacific Coast Highway. It's the only female that's being brought up to the station as we speak. They actually just put it on the radio right before you called.
Okay. I'm her mother.
Oh, okay.
And are you guys going to book her and then release her on her own recognizance tonight? Because it's dark, she doesn't have a car, and I don't want her wandering out. I'm totally just taken aback because this is so out of character for her. Yeah. And you'll see when she comes in, she's well-spoken.
Upon arrival at the Lost Hills station, Deputy Sharon Cummings booked her. Deputy Lerrero never mentioned anything about having concerns about Mitrice's mental health to either Sharon or the desk sergeant. In a later deposition, Deputy Lerrero says he observed Richardson for any signs she had to be detained for a 5150 evaluation, and he determined that it was not necessary. An email that was motioned in the same deposition was quoted in the 2011 LA Magazine article by Michael Kessler from a co-worker at the Lost Hills station. States, deputies considered letting Richardson go with a citation, but officers decided to arrest her in part because witnesses said she had been acting strangely. Deputy Lerrero made the decision to hard book Mitrice because she was acting in a bizarre manner and wanted to make sure she was all right. What is the truth? The statement from the email is directly contradicting Deputy Lerrero's sworn testimony. If you are thinking the Lost Hills Sheriff's Station sounds familiar, well, it is infamous for being the station that Mel Gibson was taken to after he received a DUI and one on his anti-Semitic rant in 2006. When he was released from custody, a deputy drove him home. While all this is going on at Geoffreys in the Lost Hill station, Mitrice is now off the phone with her mom, and her next call was to the restaurant. But at this point in the night, the sheriff's deputies have already taken Mitrice into custody, and it was too late to do anything. The authorities were handling the situation. Letitia's next call was to the Lost Hills station when talking to Deputy Cummings. She was told that her daughter was now on her way to the Lost Hills station with arresting officers and would be arriving in about 30 minutes. Even though Letitia was upset about her daughter being arrested, she had her 10-year-old daughter sleeping, and she lives an hour away from the station. She was told that Mitrice was going to be held overnight and assured that Mitrice would be safe at the station until morning. Letitia tries to get in touch with Michael Richardson, Mitrice's father, in the morning after Mitrice had been released, fearing her daughter had disappeared. After calling a few times, she gets a hold of him and tells him what was going on and her fear for Mitrice. He then calls the Lost Hills Sheriff's Station, connecting with Deputy Cummings, who tells them that they were overcrowded and overpopulated. We needed to make room. Another woman who was being held in the Lost Hills Station got in touch with the family, saying that the jail was empty that night, and what the LASD was saying was a clear lie. Letitia calls the station again around 6:30 in the morning to check on her daughter. While on the phone with the deputy, she was told that Mitrice had been released from custody at around 12:30 in the morning, despite what she had been told last night. Letitia was also told that they legally could not hold Mitrice overnight because the charges were not severe enough to do so. Mitrice had a criminal record. She passed a field sobriety test, wasn't exhibiting any weird behavior that would indicate she was a danger to herself or others. And even the amount of marijuana in her possession was not enough to legally hold her overnight. Deputies just issued a summons to appear in court and let her walk out the station into the night without notifying her mom, without a ride to her car, without knowing if someone was coming to get her, without money or her cell phone, never to be seen or heard from again. She did have her ID and 2 unknown keys on her side when she left. Deputy Cummings had even given interviews about the interactions with Mitrice that night. In an 2009 interview with the LA Times, Deputy Cummings stated that after Mitrice was released, she was given a phone and she made several calls. She did not listen to call conversations, but she did talk to her about gospel music and karma. Steve Whitmore, who was the LASD communications officer in 2009, also talked about Deputy Cummings' interactions with Mitrice that night. He said that she encouraged Mitrice to stay, and she could have had breakfast in the morning. She thinks and decides to stay, but then changed her mind, leaving the station. After leaving the station to get to her car, she faced a 10-mile walk over the deserted Santa Monica Mountains in the dark. Letitia was told in her conversation with Deputy Cummings that her daughter declined to wait in the lobby, and that the deputy did not know if Mitrice was in the lobby. Letitia was told that she had to wait 24 to 48 hours to file a missing persons report and call back in about 2 hours because they were going to check the lobby for Mitrice before they could even file a missing person report. The only way that they did not have to wait that long is if the person was mentally ill. She tries to reason with the sheriff, but the conversation ended, leaving her devastated. My writer had been at the Lost Hill station, and it is super small. It does not take 2 hours to check the lobby for someone. Letitia and Michael are appalled that their daughter was just allowed to walk out into the night like that. Letitia was told that it was standard operating procedure to let her daughter leave. She did have a bad feeling and that her daughter had to be found ASAP, otherwise she was not going to be okay. The longer the wait to look, the less likely she was going to be found alive. At the time of the report, no BOLO, be on the lookout, bulletin was issued. It was not only on the 17th about noon that anything was even investigated. After the 12-hour delay in notification of the possible sightings, the family begins to believe that the sheriff's department is not taking Mitrice's disappearance seriously. Later that day, around 6 p.m., she was contacted by the sheriff's department and was told that around 6:30 in the morning, they received a report of a possible sighting of a young woman matching Mitrice's description lurking around his Montanito home. Homeowner Bill Smith, former KTLA news anchor, called into the station saying that a young black woman with a fro was in his backyard. When he went to the window to ask if she was okay, Mitrice replied that she was fine, just resting. When he went to another window in the house to get a better look at her, she was gone. At 7:30 a.m., there was another possible sighting of Mitrice drinking from a hose, and then also around 1:30 a.m., where there was a sighting of a young black woman walking along Malibu Canyon Road. So Mitrice seems to have been alive into the morning hours following being released. After receiving these reports, the sheriff's department drives over to Smith's house, but they could not locate any women in the area, so at the time there was no way to confirm if it was Mitrice or not. The area around Monte Nido and Dark Canyon is rocky, desolate, and a lot of mountains. The last sighting was about 6 miles from the Lost Hill station. If this sighting was of Mitrice, anything could have happened to her. After all, she could have fallen into the canyon, she could have been abducted, run into people doing something illegal, or even sex trafficked. In this area, there are quiet neighborhoods where residents ride horses and hike. Although there is a dark side to the mountain. There are transients living on the mountain, cartels growing illegal weed among the trees, and ultra-violent gang-associated murders. In this area, there have been lots of bodies found. Some murdered, some thought to be suicides, some thought to be accidents, and some were just dumped there. In the 80s, the Sunset Strip killers, Doug Clark and Carol Bundy, are thought to have dumped victims' bodies out around Dark Canyon. According to the LA Times, the MS-13 street gang had been active in the area. In 2018, several members of the MS-13 gang were arrested for 7 murders in the area. Federal investigators say that the gang would lure their enemies into deserted areas, including Dark Canyon, to kill them. Informants have indicated the gang would kill them using medieval methods, including torture and even dismemberment. The Mexican cartel is also believed to set up grows in the canyon as well. Thousands of acres of marijuana was seized around 2009 and 2010. It is believed that the growers live in the mountains with the crop until it's ready to be harvested. 2 days later, after going out to Bill Smith's home in the Monte Nido neighborhood, LAPD takes over the case because the sheriff's department decides that since Mitrice was an LA resident, the case belongs to the Missing Persons Division. But eventually, Robbery/Homicide Division takes over the case. The LA police head out to search in the Monte Nido area where she was last seen. Dogs were brought in to aid in the search. Mitrice's scent was found in the backyard where the woman was reported being seen, confirming that Mitrice was in fact alive at 6:30 in the morning following her release from the sheriff's station. According to the LA Magazine article, the search was not done from the Lost Hill station. It was only done from the backyard where she was last sighted, not tracking her full movements from the time she leaves police custody. Even when the canine units were brought in to help, the trail quickly goes cold, because there are lots of animal and human prints that were contaminating the trail. They have no idea how she got there, or where she went from there. Footprints that were thought to belong to Mitrice were found starting out at a walking pace, and then the pace seems to change to a run, as though Mitrice had been spooked by something or someone heading into the dark canyon. According to an LA Times article, when the LAPD took over and went through their car, they found it was messy as though she had been living in her car. They also found her cell phone, wallet, and even an ATM card with enough money to have paid her bill. This is the same cell phone and wallet that the LA Sheriff's Department could not find when they searched her car at the scene that night. If these items were in her car, then how were they missed that night? In her car, journals were also found. They tell the story of a young woman in a serious mental health crisis. They demonstrate the anxious, disjointed, rambling thoughts that were going through her head. She talks in the journals about fixating on a woman that was not her long-term girlfriend, Tessa. She writes about doubting her career path and questioning her sexuality. The handwriting in the journals was not consistent. It is sometimes neat and thoughtful, then swings to scribble, even switching within the same sentence at times. Throughout the year, there were sightings of Mitrice. A sighting was in Vegas, where her father thinks he sees her around the strip in that area which is known for sex work. A high school friend also claims to see her in the Vegas area. The friend calls her name, Mitrice, and the woman runs, making people think there is hope that Mitrice is out there alive. Latrice had to keep pressure on the LAPD and the Sheriff's Department to find out what happened. She tries to get copies of anything she can, surveillance tapes, the incident report, call logs, phone recordings, and more. Mitrice's mom feels stonewalled, but keeps asking for the station's surveillance tapes. But the deputies keep stating that no tapes exist here. They don't want to hand her over anything and seem reluctant to admit what even exists. After pushing for a while, the Sheriff's Department finally releases tapes from the station. But when viewing them, it seemed as though they were clearly edited. The tapes show a clearly agitated Mitrice pulling on the bars of the cell. They also show an unidentified deputy leaving the station at the same time as Mitrice. The Sheriff's Department claimed that everything was done by the book, and again that they had no reason to hold her. But an email that was obtained by the LA Magazine states that the arresting deputies were concerned by her behavior. That was why she was taken into custody. It goes on to say that they were super uneasy about letting her go, and that she was acting unusual. By the time New Year's of 2010 rolls around, there is still no sign of Mitrice or any information about what has happened after leaving the Lost Hills station. On January 9th, 2010, the LASD conducted a new search on that area again and found no sign of her. In June of that year, Mitrice's parents sue the LA County and the Sheriff's deputy for 6 separate claims, including wrongful death and negligence, and including 9 officers in the case. Latrice hired Leo Terrell, a civil rights lawyer. Terrell claims in their lawsuit that Mitrice should not have been arrested that night due to the family's offer to pay the bill that both of the deputies and Geoffreys were aware of, but disregarded that information. He goes on to say that deputies failed to provide Mitrice with adequate medical care before releasing her from custody, since they believed that a 5150 may have been needed. Later additions to the case say that the LASD removed the body without the coroner's approval, making any evidence as to what happened in Dark Canyon to Mitrice nearly impossible. All claims were denied. They eventually settled for around $900,000. Later that year, on August 9th, park rangers go into Dark Canyon to check the site of a pot farm that had been shut down, making sure it was not growing again. Finding it still gone, they stumble upon the nude, partially mummified body of Mitrice. The body was found 8 miles from the Lost Hills station and 2 miles from the Montanito backyard, where she was sighted the morning she was released. At the scene, Mitrice's belongings are scattered about, leading down from a house on Puma Road. There was hair clumps all over, body parts had been separated from the rest of her body. It was obvious that animals had disturbed the scene, making piecing together what had happened even harder, but not impossible if officers had done their jobs. The Sheriff's Department arrives on the scene at about 1:30 p.m., which was about 80 minutes after the Rangers called in finding the body. The coroner was not notified until about 3 p.m., which was about 1.5 hours after the deputies arrived on the scene. This is not normal operating procedure, because it is California state law that the coroner must be called right away upon finding a dead body. At around 5 p.m., the coroner arrives with a team to catch the helicopter into the site, but no helicopter shows up. The team waits over 2 hours for the ride. The sheriffs say that the helicopter got deviated to look for a lost hiker. So, the LA County Sheriff's Department only has 1 helicopter? No way they have just 1 helicopter. Now it's about 8 p.m. They have lost the light and a day they could have been investigating on the scene. The coroner decides to come back in the morning. Since the body had been in the elements this long, 1 more night should not make a difference. It is in the middle of nowhere. It would not be a crazy thought that the scene will look the same tomorrow, but in a stroke of brilliance, the Sheriff's Department thinks it would be a good idea to fly the body out in the middle of the night before the scene was photographed. They thought this was always done, or investigated by the coroner's department using a helicopter that could not be used only a few hours before. This is again not standard operating procedure, and again, California state law says the body shall not be disturbed or moved from the position or place of death until the coroner or coroner appointed deputy. An LAPD officer stated about the case that your job is to protect the crime scene, never move a body without permission, and it just sounds ass backwards. At some point, the family hires an expert, Clea Koff, to review the finding of the coroner and sheriff's department. She had a lot of questions about the coroner, like why they did not test the hair clumps for DNA. They did not find if the hair was hers or someone else's. Was the hair cut or torn out by animals? Was the metallic fragments an earring found in a clump of hair, but it was not one that Mitrice was wearing at the time of death? So where did it come from, and was never sent for DNA testing? Why? Bug egg casings were found on her body. Since it was exposed to the elements, these can be used to construct a time frame as to when the body was put there and when they hatched. These were not tested to get a narrowed down time frame or place she died and or landed in her final resting place. Dirt from the scene was also not tested for blood DNA, so to get a better idea of the circumstances of her death, and no craniotomy was done to look for evidence or trauma. Her pubic hair was not combed to gather evidence or test for the presence of semen. When a dead body is found naked, I thought that this was just standard to do a rape kit on the body. The coroner also never tested her clothes for any kind of evidence, and for several weeks the coroner did not even know where her clothes were. Eventually, they were found crumpled up and shoved into the bottom of the body bag. The body too was just thrown in the body bag, and the coroner had no idea how this happened. The coroner noted that Mitrice's teeth were slightly pink. This is typically seen in victims of strangulation, though this is considered now to be a kind of a myth, because how can you force blood into teeth? They could not say whether she was strangled because the neck bone was not found even after the second search was done 6 months later. After both searches were done, Mitrice's family hiked and scaled the cliffs and went up to the spot that her body was found to build a memorial. While there, the family found a finger bone lying on the ground. If the family had a difficult hike to get up there, how did Mitrice, in the midst of a possible break from reality, get up there? It seems that we will not know what happened that night to Mitrice out there in the Santa Monica Mountains, or how she in fact died. Did she stumble upon something that she should not have seen? Was there an easier way to get to the spot she was found? Unless someone saw something and comes forward, we may never know. What do you think? Do you think she simply got lost? Or do you think she was abducted and raped? Or do you think she was stalked and murdered? I'd like to know in the comments, because I'm stumped as well. Thanks for watching Grimworld. Please subscribe if you like stories like this, and stay tuned for follow-ups.